So I had a really fantastic morning recording with Eva Hamilton, founder of Key for Life, for the episode of the pod this month. Eva and Key for Life do extraordinary work in prisons, specifically working with men to support a reduction in the rates of reoffending. And I've known about Key for Life for a number of years, actually, and I've known their work to be extraordinary. And so it was really a big thrill for me to be able to go and talk with Eva about the work she does and where the inspiration came from and how she does it. It was fun to go and be in her home overlooking Glastonbury. You can literally, like, as you stand outside her home, it's like you can almost touch the Tor of Glastonbury Tor, which is a wonderful setting. And we got to meet her horses and her sheep, which are actually part of the work she does. And maybe that gives you a hint about one of the kind of key takeaways I had from our conversation, which is that, yes, Eva is unorthodox. It's kind of her nature, if you like. It's very much part of her DNA. And then the work that she's doing in prisons and in the prison system, the justice system, is unorthodox. It's deeply unorthodox. But I guess my takeaway was, well, if the current systems or if the current orthodoxy isn't working or not producing the results we want, then you need to be unorthodox. You need to challenge that orthodoxy and to do something perhaps wildly different. And I think you'll get a sense from this conversation just how wildly different Eva is and wildly different the work that Key for Life is doing is, but also how impactful it is and how important it is. And there's so much I could say about this conversation, but perhaps the best thing is for you to listen to it. And I hope you'll get as much as I did and really be as inspired as I've been by the work of Key for Life. Great, Eva. Let's get started. So, well, thanks for having me here.
Great.
So lovely. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to be literally looking out the window and seeing Glastonbury Tor. It's kind of an amazing...
It's a magical place, hey?
It really is. It really is. And there's so much that I want to ask, but I want to start with just where everything began for you. So what were you born into and what did the world look like when you arrived? What were you arriving into?
Exactly. What did the world look like? That's a really good question, as I'm about to be 60 this year. Wow. 1966. I would say when I came into this world, I was born into a Irish Church of Ireland, Protestant, one of 3% in Ireland, which had its challenges. Into a loving family. Definitely there were at times challenges, but we had a really good childhood. It was, my mother really dedicated her life to her children. She didn't work. My father was a farmer, so we started on a big sheep farm.
Where was this?
In the Wicklow Mountains.
The Wicklow Mountains, okay.
And so he was young and he was very lucky. His father, well, sadly, his father died quite young, but he did inherit money and it enabled him to buy, at a very young age, a very beautiful place, which he completely transformed the land, which was predominantly, rocks and not great land for farming. And he turned it all around and he had sheep farming. So my early memories were spending a lot of time bottle feeding lambs. My mother and father would be out a lot during the night, obviously looking after the poor sheep that weren't able to, and my mother would also be helping with that. So that was, it was a pretty magical, it was an extraordinary moment. And we had our grandparents living close by as well. And we were very lucky that my grandparents left my mother a very beautiful place near a lake. So in the Wicklow Mountains, where they actually made Excalibur. So we spent a lot of our time, as we still do, at this beautiful place in Ireland called Lockdown.
And siblings?
Siblings, 2 sisters, one that's a year younger than me. and then another sister that Nicola or Louise is a year younger, and then Nicola's about 7 years younger than me. So
Okay.
there's quite a gap.
So you're the eldest,
I'm the eldest.
and
Yes.
and it sounds like a rural idyll the way you describe it. Was it quite remote?
It was very remote where the first house was. And that was, and it was very, very special. And we went to, and funnily enough, I suppose my family would tell you that when Eva was 4 years old, I was sent off to a nursery. And in the nursery, I was expelled at the age of 4, my mother was asked to remove me because of all the people that were always around me were a lot of young people who worked for my father, and their language wasn't particularly good. So I didn't know that, Fucking was a bad name. So one of my little friends, who's now a great friend, is a boy called Tarquin, and I asked him at the age of 4 to pass me the effing ruler. So I was then asked, my mother was asked to remove me, that they thought I was a bit too disruptive. So that was the kind of start of my education.
Okay. Yeah, how fascinating. So quite sort of wild and remote, but also in some ways idyllic, and
absolutely.
And lots of time just kind of, I sort of imagine just being able to wander at will and
wander
explore.
That's a great way of describing wander at will. I think my sister Louise, who was a year younger, I do remember, went missing for about 4 hours, and she'd gone up the hills. She'd done a runner, and she was only about 3 years old or 2 in her nappies. So that gives you an indication that my parents were so busy, bless them, running this farm, that when she did go missing, and she always tells everybody that when she was born, I was so jealous that she'd come into the world that I got the pram, which allegedly I did, and pushed her pram down a hill with her.
So how, are you just under or just over a year?
We're a year, not even at 13 months.
So Irish
twins. We are.
Yeah.
And we still fight like cats and dogs, even at this age, I can tell you.
And then, okay, so you're growing up in this kind of rural setting, and then what happens? What happens with schooling and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting with my parents. So being, they come from very old families that, originally Hamilton is Scottish, but they've been in Ireland since the 14th century. My mother's lineage is a very interesting one. So her family are from Sligo, and her great-great-great-aunt was Countess Markovich, who we don't talk a lot about in our family because she helped form the IRA and shot a soldier. So there was a huge story around her, but she's very much looked up to by many. And her sister, who I'm called after, Eva, was the suffragette in Ireland and did it well. Actually, in the UK, she was based, but she did amazing things, and she was a poet. But Mum's whole lineage goes back to William the Conqueror, Anne Boleyn. I mean, it's an incredible lineage. So under my mother's drawing, or under her actual billiard table, she has got it goes back, nearly 1,000 years. She's got paperwork on her family and what they've achieved. But they were known, her family were known in Ireland to be very good landowners, and they really looked after everybody in Sligo. So it's a very interesting. And then my mum's grandfather was Sir John Lumsden, and he set up the Irish. He set up a number of things. He actually worked in Guinness and was Guinness's doctor, and he was the man that coined Guinness's good for you.
No, that's amazing.
And he went out and did incredible work working with the families in living in the most impoverished areas of Dublin. So he was amazing. And then he set up St John's Ambulance Brigade in Dublin. And he's an extraordinary man. And that was my mum's grandfather. So it's very interesting in a way why maybe I've got into, obviously talking about my schooling. So that was kind of what I grew up with, an extraordinary family.
So this kind of, there's this lineage, there's this kind of sort of aristocratic, really kind of English lineage, and then there's an intersection with Ireland, and then the kind of the Troubles, or the Troubles is maybe a little more, well, I don't know, more contemporary, but that you've got this link between the kind of English, Irish, or British Irish Troubles as well, and but you're this, so there's all this in the background, but you're growing up in this at the same time, probably like a bubble or a rural sort of isolation or something
I think
like
it
that.
started like that as a bubble, probably particularly when we were at the farm. Then we moved to another place in Enniskerry. My father decided that he'd get into a state agency, and he set up Jackson Stops in Ireland. And at that point, we moved to a place called Enniskerry, which is very beautiful. And it was rather interesting because, as you said earlier, we were remote. And then suddenly we found ourselves with people quite close to us. It was a lovely house. And we became very close to these two boys who are our neighbours, Tarquin and Piers. And it was like an Enid Blyton book. We spent our whole life with these two boys, my sister Louise and I. So we had a very interesting, and I did go to school. Then they put us to an all-girls school, which I didn't particularly like as a day pupil. Then I got moved at the age of about 9 into boarding school to an all-girls school in Ireland. A lot of Protestant people. So that was kind of difficult as well, because for me, I didn't really see much of a difference between Protestants and Catholics. So at that division, even though I know my parents, a lot of the people we went to were people like us, and then and the school was great. I learned quite a lot. I wouldn't say I was always the best behaved. And then I went on for my last 2 years to St. Columba's College, which is very much like a public school in Ireland, in the mountains. And I'd never been in a mixed school apart from when I was very small, and I got kicked out. But I was then thrown into a school with a lot of boys, and oh my goodness, I thought, where have I landed? And I found it just, I suppose, initially it was a bit, when I say unsettling, you're suddenly in with a very different dynamic when you've got boys. And there was a lot of girls. I did know some of the girls, thankfully. But in my first class, I was just sitting in the back with the boy that all the girls really quite fancied. And he happened to be called Mickey Love. And the Irish teacher, and I even though I'm in Irish classes, I must say I'm not a great Irish speaker. It was never a language that I really was good at. And she kept calling him Love, but I presumed she was calling him Love. That was just it wasn't his surname. So I started laughing. Anyway, she threw me out and him straight to the warden within, I think, my first half an hour at that school. Yeah. So I was being seriously reprimanded, and he still tells everyone to this day, you can't believe it.
So there's a sort of, I just get this sort of sense of there's a kind of non-conformist streak that's quite, I don't know, just sort of quite, just sort of baked in. It's like, it doesn't feel like you're rebelling against something. It's more like, I get this picture of someone, a girl who's just quite independently minded.
And free-spirited.
Free-spirited, and yes. Yeah. And then that doesn't always work well with whatever's going on in terms of the institution that you're being asked to cooperate with, or something like that.
That's absolutely right. But the boys, and you're right, that I was free-spirited. They used to do terrible things to me. On my birthday, they threw me into a swimming pool that hadn't been used for about God knows how many years and had green on the top of it. And they threw me in, ripped everything off me, threw me in, and all ran back they all had their homework to do. And next thing, the worst master of all appeared, yelling when he saw me dripping. And he had to throw me and said, wrap yourself up in your gown. And then the next morning, we all go to chapel. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is still, I hope that I'm not in trouble over this. I didn't do it. And next thing, the warden, when he turned left coming out, you knew there was trouble. And he turned left. So it meant the whole lot of us had to go into the into the schoolroom. And then he said, there was an incident last night. There was a young lady thrown into a swimming pool, and I'm absolutely horrified about what happened. And I'd like everybody to stand up who was part of it. So I think there must have been about 10 guys got sent off, and they all got into his thing. So I don't know if they got caned or whatever, but they certainly got gated, and there were so many of them.
So is it when you think about that experience, was that an experience that you found disturbing, or was it to you just that was you mucking about with guys? Or
no, I found it quite I found it hugely amusing, but I did feel for them when they all got gated.
Yes.
I didn't do that. They did it to me, so they had to reap the consequences.
Well, I'm just kind of drawing threads, and maybe I'm stretching a bit, but it just, again, it seems like there's this thread of being very comfortable with men. And that might be a bit of a funny way to say it for about a young girl, essentially. But when we think about the work that you're doing now, but there's something about that it felt very natural to you. Your best friends growing up were boys, and then, you're ragging with the lads at school. So is there something in that as a kind of thread somehow?
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. It's very interesting the way you describe it, and particularly with the boys we hung out with when we were younger, because when I was in all those all-girls schools, I didn't really meet boys. But the boys I did meet, I forged good relationships with. Maybe that's where you're looking for different role models and, I don't know, for me, maybe I'm not necessarily a tomboy, because I'm a bit of if someone wanted to hurt me, I wouldn't be the one who'd run a mile or take it very badly. But at the same time, I'm somebody who, I'm a free spirit. So like at that last school I went to, I happened to have a boyfriend from another school who came from a very different background. And in a way, that was probably the rebel in me, that even though I was in a school with all the young men that my parents would have liked me probably to have ended up with, I would be hanging out with boys from schools that were maybe Catholic boys. And they'd even come up and visit me in the schools, come up and see us all. But they were very different to what my parents and others would probably think I should have been hanging out.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting to see that early on. And then, so then after school, then what happened?
So after school, you know what? I would say that for me, it was a massive wake-up call, because I went away to Paris. I didn't get the grades that I thought I was hoping to get. And I thought, you know what, Eva, you did get distracted. I definitely think I didn't necessarily study as much as I should have. I definitely was distracted in school. So I was left with, what am I going to do? Am I going to go and do some course, or am I going to go traveling and do something a bit different? So my father was involved. My godfather was a man called Alex Finlater. He had a Finlater's wine merchant, and he knew some people out in Paris. And so there was a thought, why doesn't Eva go to Paris? Which is what I did. But oh my goodness, I went to go to.
So how old are you?
I was 18.
18.
And I went to Paris and went to work for one of the toughest women you could ever imagine. So you could imagine bourgeois French, charming husband who spoke English, and she was an absolute, well, not particularly nice at times. She could be nice when she wanted to be, but she had two sons, Charles and William. And I arrived. First, she took me up 7 floors and said, right, I've never lived on my own before. You're living in this, right in the top of this kind of flat place. So I went up there. She showed me where I was going to be living. That's great. Then she said, right, my 2 sons are here.
The kind of the servants' quarters at the top.
Servants, exactly. Yeah. And you are going to be in that room for 3 hours. I work as a speech therapist. I'm next door. You can't let them make any noise, and you'll be here for 3 hours, and you get on with it every day. And maybe I'll let you out and take them out to the park. So anyway, honestly, they were so badly behaved, these children. She spent her time roaring at me and roaring at them. Then we go out and they try and run away from me in parks. I mean, they liked me, but the whole thing was just, for 10 months, no one could believe I could stick it at this job. The only thing that kept me going was I had a lot of Irish girlfriends who'd come over, and we got to meet people, and we went out, and we had a fabulous, we'd go out and do fun things. But I also
what were the girlfriends doing? Same kind of thing.
They were. Some of them were au pairing, some weren't. Yeah. Some were doing other jobs. Actually, I would have probably preferred to be a cleaner. Yeah. Some of them were cleaners. I should have been a cleaner. And that would have been better. She just had me like that. So to give you an example, there was no such thing as mobile phones. So any of my friends that wanted to ring me and talk to me, she wouldn't let anyone ring me during the day. They would only be allowed to ring between 8 and 9 at night. 8 and 9 at night. I'm supposed to be home by then, going out with my friends. Anyway, so that was challenging. Then I had one incident, which is a funny one. The other one isn't quite so funny, but there was an incident where she looked after her mother's dog, her little Wrigley's, this terrier thing, and I was taking him for a walk. And next thing, I had him in the lift, and he wouldn't get in the lift. And next thing, I'm holding the handle of the lead, and it went down 6 floors. And I was still holding the handle of the lead, and I thought Reglisse had been killed.
So the dog was on the other side of the
on
door.
the other. I thought he was, but he managed to have broken. Thank
my
God. But for
God.
those, can you imagine going down
Yeah.
thinking this dog is now,
No.
been killed by
Yeah.
me, Eva. So it was just such a it was one of those ghastly moments. But then I would go to the Sorbonne. So just so you know, in the morning, I'd go off and study and did French and met all sorts of people. And for me, it was a huge wake up to be on my own. And I think I hadn't spent much time ever on my own, because being a boarder at school, you're with lots of people. So when you're in that little flat, I did, there were times I struggled.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you're 18, you're away from home properly for the first time, and I mean, although you boarded, but just being stuck in this room
Oh my God.
under the thumb of
a woman who literally was controlling me. And then unfortunately, at something, I would say this was a big defining moment in my life, what happened now. I don't always share this story a lot because it is quite distressing. But she one morning said, right, I need you in tomorrow morning. We're doing we're having a big lunch party, and I want you to work on a Saturday morning. So you've got to be here at 8:00 and you're not to be late. Anyway, I go out the night before. I end up being in a nightclub with a boy I was seeing and other friends. And anyway, I knew I had to get up early. So I left Montparnasse, which was probably 15 minutes away from my home, to go out and get a cab. Anyway, there was no official cabs, but there was mini cabs. And this guy pulled up and he said, I'm a mini cab driver. Where do you need to get to? And I explained 15th arrondissement, where I lived, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, next thing, I get in the car, I'm sitting in the back of the car, and next thing I see Bois de Boulogne on the sign. I went, oh my God, where are you taking me to? Tried to open the door and the door was locked. So I had the most horrific ordeal with this man, and he took me into the middle of the Bois de Boulogne, and I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing a striped all-in-one outfit. Anyway, he started obviously trying to get me to do things to him. He started trying to rip my clothes off. And he essentially, had me there for 2 hours.
Oh my God.
And I ended up saying to him, because I thought, what am I going to do? He told me he was going to let me out. So I knew there was cars all around, because it was in the middle of a forest. But, obviously there was other people out doing what he was doing. Anyway, he eventually, a great friend of mine, Daisy Borman, whose father's John Borman, she and her sister Katrina told me a story 2 weeks before in Paris that they'd been leaving the Bandouche nightclub, and this guy chased them, and they were in bikinis and stuff. And Daisy said, if ever you get into trouble, Eva, just go sugar, sugar, sugar and pretend you're mad. So do you know, I did exactly what she did. And then I started hyperventilating like I couldn't breathe. And he panicked. And he drove me back to Paris, and he drove me close to my street. And when I got out of the car, he said to me in French, he was Algerian, I reckon. He said he was French, but I think he was Algerian. He said, you're a very lucky girl to be alive, because I killed a girl last weekend, and everything I've told you, you will never be able to trace me.
Oh my
So
God.
I go in a completely didn't really thought this was all a nightmare, couldn't even believe what was happening to me. Got upstairs to my room, went to sleep, didn't wake up in time, woke up, looked at my watch, thinking, oh my God, I've got to be in by 8. It was 8:30 at this point, and looked at my face, and he'd cut my neck, and it was probably May or June, and I panicked and thought, oh my God, it wasn't a nightmare. This did happen to me. So I then found myself going across, put a scarf around my neck to see my madame, who I was working for, who yelled at me when I arrived that I was half an hour late. I was utterly traumatized. The whole day, I couldn't even think when I was trying to look after her children, looking at what this, and it was all coming back to me, what happened. Anyway, didn't tell her, obviously, anything. And then that night, I went to meet a friend of mine, Melinda's brother, who was a lawyer. And you have to remember, you don't have phones. You can't phone people. And I went out for a drink with him, and he just went, oh my God, Eva, that is the most horrific story I've ever heard. You should tell the police. But he said, the problem is you got into that car, then it's going to be very difficult to prove, and you won't find him. Anyway, I shut that down after that. I never discussed it with a soul, apart from him, until certain things came back later in my life to haunt me.
Oh my God, Eva, what an incredibly traumatic experience.
It was.
And then, of course, I mean, at any time that's going to be traumatic, but particularly, this is before the days when anyone maybe was understanding that it's important to process these kind of, when things like that happen, and not having anyone you could talk to.
Because I was embarrassed by what had happened. I always blamed myself for getting into that car, but it was attacked. It wasn't my fault, but I didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Wow. So you kind of pushed that to the side.
Came back from Paris.
Came back from Paris, kind of buried that in a way.
Yeah.
And then what happened next? What then?
So the next thing that happened was my father sent me off, was getting a little bit agitated by me at this point, and said, right, what are you going to do? If you're not going to go to university, you need to go and do some business course or a secretarial. And they sent me to Oxford. So that's where I spent just over a year, met some really nice people, hated having to be doing the secretarial stuff, but I went along with it. And what happened there was my father did give me a bit of an ultimatum. He said, Eva, I'm not having you back at Christmas. You've got to get yourself a job now. This is it. And, I could see he was trying to get me to take responsibility. And out of nowhere, this agency appeared and said, oh, we're looking to hire girls from this particular, the Ox and Cow it's called.
Yeah.
And, we're going to put you up for this job. And I went, oh, really? Well, who am I going to meet? And they said, well, she's a pretty formidable woman. So to cut a very long story short, I went to London, met this extraordinary girl from Ireland who really quite liked me, which was great. Then she said, you're going to meet the big boss. And the woman was a powerhouse when I met her, and a man called Admiral Sir Peter White. So I was going to be a secretary at the Industrial Society to both of them. Okay. And Julia said, no, darling, I want to get this girl out to meet me, and she's got to come out and see me in action. So I get sent off to God knows where, it must have been about 50 miles from Oxford, to meet Julia, who was doing a speech to 800 kids. And she then, it was in the evening, and she made me stand up. I mean, I was terrified of public speaking. Stand up and say who you are. So I did. And then on the way back, she said to me, well, darling, where are you going now? It's like 9 o'clock. And I said, well, I've come to see you. Are you able to drop me at Oxford? And unbeknown to me, not knowing, being Irish, I didn't know the geography at all. It was obviously the other way. And poor old Julia dropped me to Oxford and then drove back to London. I fell asleep at the wheel and had a car crash. So always to this day goes, can you believe when I interviewed Eva? That's what happened. So she was incredible, and word came back. Oh, yes, I know what they got. A darling man called Robbie Mathers, who used to live near here, sadly died in a car crash, but he was one of her directors. And they sent him and another man off to interview me. I mean, I had so many interviews, you can't imagine. And another man called Paddy Winter. And Paddy Winter asked me, what is something like 8% of 90? And I was like the worst person at maths. I was like, I can't believe he's asked me that question. I haven't got a clue. I'm thinking I'm not going to get the job, but I did get it. I think Joanna, the Irish girl, quite liked me and said, well, let's give her a try. So anyway, they gave me a try, worked as her secretary. It was a mad session. Like, working for Julia was just crazy.
What was her function? What was she doing?
She was the director of education at that point, and one of the most powerful. I mean, I've never seen a woman who juggles more than I juggle, and she was incredible. So fantastic. I started. Yeah. So she her and Sir Peter White were giving me the backbone. They kept dealing with me.
What year are we roughly?
So I would have been 19, okay. And it would have been in the mid-80s.
Mid-80s, yeah.
And she was great. And then, to be perfectly honest, I was probably at that time still quite wayward. Like, I had taken things I shouldn't have taken, in my youth. And at that point, I had 1 or 2 lung collapses, and my lungs were collapsing. And I then decided, you know what, I'm done with this whole secretary. I love Julia, but actually I'm going to go off traveling. So I then went with a girlfriend of mine. We decided to go, when I was probably 19, 20, to go off around the world. So we started in India, and that was really where I got my calling, was that I went to, I'm the sort of person who faints at the sight of blood. but we were in the Salvation Army hostel in Calcutta, and this doctor came up to us and said to my friend Rachel, who's really gutsy, would you come and help me, please, at the home for the dying with at Mother Teresa's? And she went, no, I couldn't do it. And I went, okay, well, I'm not usually very brave, but I will come. And, you know, it was my defining moment in my life, scrubbing people who were about to dye their hairs, taking the maggots out of their head, cleaning, scrubbing mattresses with Mother Teresa's number 2, Sister Luke. Unbelievable. It was just one of those incredibly extraordinary moments. And anyway, after that...
how long were you?
I just did 4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days there,
But I got this calling, and it was like God speaking to me, or whatever you believe, the universe saying, and it was a very clear voice, you are not here to make lots of money, you are here to serve. And it was like a big statement I received. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, where has that come from? But I was so taken by all these people in Calcutta, particularly. I've been all around it. There's poverty everywhere, but Calcutta really struck a chord with me, and particularly Mother Teresa's home for the dying. So I then...
Did you see her?
She was away, sadly, but she very much, I feel her presence.
Yes,
she very much works through me, because I'll tell you afterwards, I did take my kids back there. And then just moving forward from there, I went to Australia, went down to Bali, and we were traveling, having a great time. And then I got this job working for Ken Doan, this famous artist. And he at the time was breaking up with his wife. He was a very famous guy in Sydney. And it was so embarrassing, because he kept saying, right, Eva, can you come in here now and take down in his Aussie accent what you call it, when you have to write down shorthand, take down. And of course, then I could never read back what I've done. So I'd sort of type his letters, and he'd go, oh, Eva, you are great, and I do love you, Eva, but listen, you've written me completely the wrong thing. I didn't say this to you. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not very good at shorthand. You can now see why I wasn't a very good secretary. So he found it quite funny. But then he said to me one day with his team, can you lift that television? And I said to him, listen, I've had lung collapses. And he started laughing, and he said, what do you mean you've had lung collapses? I've had lung collapses, I can't lift that television. So anyway, he was going on about it. I went, okay, I will lift it. And within seconds, my lung collapsed. So right in front of him. So he got the shock of his life. So I ended up then being stuck in Australia for quite some time, quite ill, with this lung collapse. No one knowing why she'd had 3 or 4 lung collapses. They didn't go inside, but it's rest, got it back up. I then flew from there to Hawaii, to New York, went to see an old boyfriend, didn't want to go back to Ireland. He was like, Eva, you have to go back to Ireland to face your health. So I got back to Ireland, and literally the surgeons were waiting for me, and they said to me, I'm afraid, Eva, we've looked at your lungs. You've got all these markings on both lungs, but we're going to go in on the left. We're going to take out half of your lung. It's a very big operation. And, so anyway, to cut a very, very long story short, I was in hospital for 2 weeks. They found a disease. They said they thought I had something called histiocytosis X.
Yeah, that's a big...
Sorry, we're recording, James. It's yeah. Will you two speak outside? And then, so just going back to what I was saying, that the doctors realised that there was something wrong, and they found a lump on my lung, and it's a disease they'd never seen in a lung before. It's very, very unusual, called histiocytosis X. And one of the reasons you can get it is from sheep or mercury. And when you dip a sheep in mercury, we don't know whether I caught that from when I was very young. So to cut a very long story short, it was a horrific operation. I had drains coming out with me. I have never screamed in my life like it when they ripped out the drain after 2 weeks inside me. So I went through that was a big moment. And because the doctors didn't know if I was going to survive this disease, Julia, back in London, my lovely old boss, had just moved to work at Business in the Community with Prince Charles, as he was then. And they were all very kind to me. Everyone was writing to me and saying, would you come back? So the doctors did say eventually, as long as she's under the Brompton, we will send her back to the UK, but we need to monitor her at the Brompton carefully. So I was put back into a typing pool. And everyone was thinking, I mean, I just felt, and I was quite disruptive because I just did not want to be in a typing pool. Julia then said, darling, when you get better, I want you back in to be my PA now, not secretary. So I started as that. And then Robbie, the man who lived near here, who was tragically killed, he kept saying to Julia, but come on, you've got to give Eva more. And the king, as he is now, Prince Charles, came up with an idea.
So Julia was working for business in the community?
Yes, she was the MD.
She was the MD, okay, for the then Prince Charles.
Okay. And Stephen O'Brien was the CEO.
Okay.
And she then, the king, as he is now, said, you know what, I'm worried in 1989 about how do we engage the hearts and minds of all these CEOs, but get to the layer below them as well as the CEOs. Because when a chief exec like Lord Lang, who used to run United Biscuits, when he leaves United Biscuits, you need to make sure that there's a successor there that's going to take over the baton. So I then, the king said, or the Prince of Wales said, let's take CEOs into the inner cities. And do you know what? Right place, right time. 1990, I started that for him. My first visit was so the first event I did was at St.
What
James's.
was it called? Was it just
the Prince of Wales' Seeing is Believing program.
Seeing is Believing, okay.
Yeah. So I ran that for him for, 9 years. But I took chief execs into the most deprived areas. So my first visit was Pentonville Prison, led by Peter Costain of Costains. And then I would take Branson, loads of them. And they'd all go with me to Moss Side, Brixton, Pentonville, go to meet the IRA, you name it, we did it. I took them to some of the most troubled communities in Britain, homeless projects. And then Prince Charles would come with me sometimes. So I'd take him to Leeds. Him and I would go off to homeless projects, and I'd take a load of business people with him. So the amazing magic about that was it's getting out of their head and getting people into their hearts. So we take people literally out of their ivory towers and show them what's going on in this country.
That's so interesting. I was just kind of scanning in my own mind, what is the golden thread? And you just answered the question, which of course speaks to, the king's very much where his heart's at, I think, which is, yes, moving from the head to the heart, or connecting the two.
That's right.
And that kind of very heart-led purpose. And that's really, I think you articulated that really beautifully.
Yeah.
So okay, so carry on. You were
just on those visits. So we ran those visits and they were just amazing. So you'd make, I had to kind of put together either a half day or a whole day. And it was pretty full on stress as well, because, you could have Terry Leahy, the ex-CEO of Tesco, me and 10 CEOs going, great, I've got a whole bunch of people from this housing estate, they're going to meet you. You never know who's going to walk in off the road and maybe start yelling at them and realising that's Tesco, I don't like Tesco. Or you're always trying to manage, and you're also trying to give them a real insight. So we never staged anything. So it was incredible. So I ran that for him till 88 or whatever it was. And then unfortunately for me, I had a not a great time in my last, probably at the end of it, because I burnt out, but in a way that took me out of Key for Life, I'm talking about my own charity, out of Seeing is Believing and business in the community, probably for the best part of a year. I started, my past started haunting me. And, you can bury and bury and bury, but if you don't address what's gone on inside you, things will come back to haunt you. And basically that's what happened. I burnt out. My brain, it was just awful. And it actually ended up me having to be hospitalised in Ireland. Yeah. And I was put under Anthony Clare, who's now dead. And he was that great man who did in a psychiatry chair. And he was great. And they were trying to fathom out what went wrong. And they didn't really get it first time. And I had to go back in. And then when they got me and they realised, that I'd buried a lot of things. Yeah. And that kind of is what I think. So for me, that was a huge wake up. And in that period, I'm really lucky to have an amazing husband like James, because one of the greatest things that came out of Seeing is Believing was that Trafalgar House, which is the company he was working for, I'd never met him before, but some strange things happened. One of the outputs that came from the Seeing is Believing program was two very prominent things. Peter George, who ran Ladbrokes, gave me a 32,000 square foot building in Liverpool and said, right, do an Annika Rice, convert it into a homeless shelter and training, which I did. We were still building it when the king or the prince came to open it, but it was incredible. That was a real big moment for me. I was only 23, 24.
Amazing.
And we managed to pull that off. It was extraordinary. And then another extraordinary thing was that John Ansdell, finance director of Trafalgar, came out on a visit, loved what he saw on the homeless front and phoned me and said, I've got a building in London. So anyway, they converted it with some mungos into a homeless shelter. But at the opening, I saw James, my now husband, in the distance, and we never spoke. But I thought, oh, he looks quite nice. And he looked at me and I thought, right, never see him again. And then 4 or 5 months later, I was out with friends, due to be away actually with friends, and they cancelled last minute. So I was in London, which I never was at the weekends. And James and I just ended up going to something with some Irish people, and he was with them. And he said, were you at the opening of Siddon's house? And I said, yes. And he said, oh my God, you're the same girl, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the story goes on from there. And, you know, we were going out and he stood by me, you know, not many men. I was 11 stone.
Whilst you were going through that
I was in the psychiatric
breakdown.
I wasn't even married to him. And he proposed to me 2 weeks after I came out of the psychiatric. And I thought he'd run off with other friends of mine or he'd have no interest, but he stood by me, which I have to say was pretty admirable. Yeah.
So there are these kind of pivotal moments or foundational experiences, whether it's and quite a lot of it's to do with trauma as well, isn't it? And then having that experience in India where you feel a calling, a sense that your life is going to be about service. And there's also this sense I have of someone who's, you know, got a lot of energy and is able to, you know, maybe not intentionally, but put yourself sort of in the center of things.
Yeah.
Whether that's, you know, with one of the kind of great artists of, you know, in Sydney, or was it Sydney? It was
Yes,
Sydney,
that's correct. Yeah.
Or whether it's, you know, with the Prince in London and in around the UK. So, and then there's this thread of, yes, the thread of service is coming into sort of more tangible expression through the charitable works. And then this kind of connecting, I kind of had this picture of, you know, we live in a world that does have extremes of advantage and disadvantage, and then you're finding yourself in work that's bringing the two together.
That's right.
And there's something in the value in just bringing those things together, even before you think about, well, what are the tangible outputs? There's something kind of necessary about making connection, you know, that we are all at the end of the day human beings having a human experience in this world, and that it's necessary that we don't just live in isolation.
That's right.
wherever we find ourselves in that spectrum of experience. And I'm jumping ahead again to the kind of work you're doing now, but it's connecting those two, the two extremes on the spectrum in a way somehow.
I totally get that. You know, when you talk about people living in a bubble, I think, kind of going into the society we live in, I suppose for me, I found my whole career has been, you heard about the, seeing is believing, and that's all great that I went on to do, just so you know, a homeless work. So out of that very dark, horrible moment I went through where I thought I was literally rubbish and I was never going to, I was never going to ever make it back. I'd lost my sort of confidence and what do people think about me now, and was I not, able to do this job any longer, and why God me, why do I have to be going through this pain? Because what I haven't said to you is when I was in the bloody hospital, I mean, ghastly things happened. The first night I was in the hospital, first afternoon, My mother and sister, they moved me into a private room because they wanted to put me in an open ward. I've never been with people who are seriously mentally ill. And this woman, they made me get out and have tea with her. And she had white facial hair all over her face. I mean, I thought it was a mask. I didn't even think these people were real. And then that night, my first night in that hospital, I have never been so scared in my life because I kept thinking, the IRA, they're all going to get me, and that I'd work with the prince, because already, you know, dear old Anthony Clare arrived with a letter that the palace had sent, and I just didn't want anyone to know. I was paranoid. And that night, this girl at 3 a.m, I hadn't slept for a year. You know, that was the whole point. That was why I was so ill. I couldn't sleep. And she dumped on my bed and tried to strangle me. You know, and that happened. And then she attacked my mother when she came that morning to see me. I heard my mother screaming. You know, it was like a hell. It was like I'd been to hell and back. You know, and I don't think people realize till you've been through horrific stuff, just how, sometimes you've got to pinch yourself and think I'm safe. So,
well, it seems to me that you have this deep affinity with the experience of trauma, and then there's a compassion that comes with that for other people's experience of trauma, and then that becomes also a thread through your work. That your work is very much about bringing more compassion to people's experience of trauma.
That's right. And you're right, because when I see my men in prison or the homeless that I worked with for many years. So, you know, as I said, I ran that big homeless, came back from nowhere, and dealing with homeless people who've been soldiers, they're sleeping on the streets. Business people who, you know, might have been a CEO of a company, he's sleeping on the streets, you know, on the Strand in London. I find that hugely upsetting. I can't believe how in the world we inhabit, families just let people go. Yes, maybe they've chosen to go, but it's such a tough world when you meet people who are on the streets.
Well, and then maybe we as a society let people go as well.
We do. You're spot on. We're also busy with sort of tick boxing and making sure things are done right. The human. So for me, the homeless bit that I did, and BBC made a program about my homeless work, headhunting the homeless. They followed us, and I'm never one to let the cameras in, but that was a huge success, award-winning. And you know, the people I had on that award-winning documentary, one was from Sherborne. He was an accountant sleeping on the street. They all popped up. Little Carol Thatcher, not Margaret Thatcher's daughter, another one. You know, I had 6 of them who were followed, and people to this day stop me going, were you the girl who did that show? So the homeless work is in my heart. I just felt so compelled to do it, but I ran it. And then I got to a point where in 2006, I've been running it for 10 years. I designed this incredible model to get them back to work, but yet 30% were back on the streets. So when I said to these homeless people, why are you back on the streets? They said to me, because our demons came back to haunt us. So that was when I realized, actually, with my own pain, no one knew anything about me at that point, I was able to open up and say, I get it. Trauma, pain, I've been there. And then I went on to set up the Warrior Program, the military charity, which I ran for 6 years. And that was seeing soldiers coming back from war-torn zones who hadn't left their bedroom in 4 years because they were in so much pain. So, and that's still going strong. And then in 2011, I did have a blip. You know, I had a bit of not an easiest time with some of the military people, but, and that was when my horses stepped in, and I was here, depressed, 2 children, you know, not an easy time. We all go through it. And that was where Key for Life grew, because every time I went out to my horses, they made me feel so great. I didn't know what was going on. I had 4 horses. I've got 2 of them still, who are a huge feature in my life, Carlos and Cruising, and my 2 children and a husband. But I can tell you one thing, having depression and being in a bad way, like suicidal, having 2 children that you're in charge of, and, you know, Emily and Ali. Ali was just great. You know, one of them asked, you know, when you're driving your child back from school and your son says to you, you're not going to do anything to yourself, are you? And they're only little. When you're feeling that way, it's horrific. I will never, ever, 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 ever wish to go back to what happened in that year. So people can think sometimes in life, oh, it's all in the past. No, you've got to be on your game every day. You know, we all do. None of us know what's going to come and hit us.
Yeah.
So my two kids and my husband and my family here, you know, when I ran Warrior, but, you know, in that year of my low point, suddenly up above, God's just like, come on, Eva, we've got a model for you. Put all your learning together. And that's what Key for Life is. I just thought, right, I'm going to rewrite a brand new model of everything I've learned, put it in. Never thought anyone would take much notice. Fly to New York, go and meet former gang leaders in Harlem and the Bronx. And I showed them all the model. And I said, what do you think? They said, love it, bring it to America. I said, no, I'm not bringing it to America. I'm bringing it to Bristol, not quite so sexy. And anyway, I brought it because luckily I'd run a military program in Dovegate Prison. So they knew me, Serco. And Wynne said, right, tell her we'll let her in to the YOI in Bristol, the toughest prison in Britain. And I was like, right, okay, can you give me 23 guys? Yeah, we'll give you 23 guys. What I didn't realize was they were giving me the 23 of the toughest gang leaders in Britain. So when we arrived to run my first program, which everyone had heard about, the trainers, after 10 minutes, they're all military, said, we want to go. We're not sticking around. They're so rude. And I'm like, no, please let us in. Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. Wait for the horses. And the minute the horses arrived, 15 minutes later, 2 mares.
Were you taking the horses to the prison?
Into the prison, yeah.
Wow.
And the horses went ballistic. Dawn Oakley-Smith, who's wonderful, she runs Hartshaw.
Yeah.
She came in and with the horses, and the same young men that were showing us no respect were now hiding under their chairs. They were so scared of the horses. Yeah. So that was the moment that I realised, thank you, God, now I know why I've got the horses here.
Yes.
And that was the start of Key for Life. And then that afternoon, I brought in David from Universal Music and Darkers, who ran Island Records. He was managing Amy Winehouse at the time and a lot of artists. And he was with our group. And then another 23 children who were all lifers. They were all in for murder. And there were 40 of them, 3 of them in a room. And for 6 minutes, he couldn't get any of them to talk. None of them wanted to talk to him. So until he mentioned a rapper from West London called Angel. And the minute he mentioned Angel, the whole room erupted. And when he left, he said, I'm never doing that again. But I want Angel down here in 2 weeks' time. So Angel and a guy called Ben Scar, who manages Dave, the famous rapper, they arrived in a big black Mariah. And I'm there, sniffer dogs here. And they opened the door, stinking of weed. I thought, oh my goodness me, we're going to be shut down. We haven't even started. And amazingly, they got in. And they watched some of my really naughty boys perform. And they said, we've never seen anything like this. They're amazing. So we then created an album probably 3 months later. And
what year are we? What year we are?
2012.
2012. And then that really launched.
That was the world. Bob Geldof then stepped in.
Yeah.
And Bob did a great event here at Cadbury Court. And he was wonderful. Yeah. And he kickstarted the charity for me, helped me. Yeah.
Amazing. And so then it really was formed officially, formally. And so what, for you, what's the golden thread in Key for Life? That, what is it that you, in a way, why offenders? Why prison? Why offenders? Why, what is it that
very good.
drew you to that?
Well, for me, in 2011, when I was having my difficult time, it was actually when the riots were taking place in the UK.
Yeah.
And I saw children as young as 8 rioting. And I realized this is crazy. We've got to get to people younger. And we've got to really get to the root cause of these guys' problems. We're just sticking, plaster on these issues. And that was really what spurred me on to think, right, I need to create a model, firstly, that's engaging. And quite frankly, Sam, better than any of us, with our boys, you've got to go in there with high energy. You've got to do a lot. You've got to keep these guys engaged. I've put 3,000 people through a program. I've put 7,000 children. We're now in whatever we are in. We're in, we've run 48 programs. We're in Manchester, the Midlands, London, the Southwest. And the guys we work with are tough. Most of my men, some of them have up to 100 offences. They have an average of 7. They're offences, they're prolific offenders. They're the ones that most people can't work with. So what the magic of that 7-step model, is just, I've got one who's just been ringing me this morning, he's working with me, we're hoping to get him into KPMG, we're doing well, we're getting great results. It doesn't always work. We've got some that got to go back inside. One guy yesterday, sadly, we've done a lot for him. He was doing brilliantly and he went back out with an old girlfriend, started taking drugs again. He's now back in prison. You're not going to win them all, but a lot of the addiction ones, it's trauma, as you talked about.
And what is it, do you think, that particularly draws you? Because there's I have this idea that, you're in the world and really you're seeking, where can I serve in some ways? Like that's the kind of continual thread in some ways. And then there's something about the desire or being drawn towards, the desire to heal trauma or create a space for trauma to be processed or something like that. And it makes perfect sense to me that you would be doing this work in prisons. But I wonder, from your point of view, what was it about prisons that you were drawn to? Like, because you could do your work in lots of, with the homeless, as you still do.
Yeah.
But in lots of other arenas.
Question. I think, I think with the prison service, it's in chaos. And I think for me, one of the worst things that could happen to any human being, in my view, is losing your freedom and being locked in a cell. And, I just feel that for me, the prisons drew me in because I recognized there was such untapped talent amongst these young men. And that if we've had a good upbringing, we know the do's and the don'ts. I recognise very quickly, having met a lot of these guys, that their mum, they've no father. So 70% of our guys have no father. 65% to 70% left school before the age of 16. Like, I've had them live here. I've had a lot of them. We don't do it now, but they used to. And I can tell you one thing, you get a real insight to where it's all gone wrong. And it starts as young as 6, 7, where that kid will end up, no dad around, mum can't cope, she's got other kids, there's no electricity, there's no food. Somebody on the housing estate's driving a beautiful car, before you know it, they offer you sweets. Then the sweets turn into drugs a few years later. It starts with knives, you're in a or it could be as simple as you're part of these guys who are maybe getting involved with, I don't know, selling, which you shouldn't be selling. And next thing, your bicycle gets nicked by guys you used to know from another housing estate. And then those rival gangs start. It can be as simple as that. Then they start carrying knives to begin with, then it's guns. Most of the guys on my program at the moment in London, some of them are quite older, 32 of them, I would say most of them, a lot of it's guns.
I don't have a very deep insight into this, but I know you do. But I remember meeting, it might have been with Key for Life actually, but meeting one of your clients and essentially the choice that they were being confronted with is, what do I do with the few quid that I've got? Do I use it to get to the job interview or do I use it to buy food? And I was thinking, that's a very, very challenging choice to be confronted with for anybody. And if those are the kinds of choices you're having to make, then I can well see how, the opportunity to make some decent money doing something criminal becomes quite appealing. Compelling.
Compelling. One of my boys yesterday, he keeps telling me, Eva, I'm on 5,000 a day. Try and beat that. And I said, well, if you want to be in prison for the rest of your life and keep coming back, then you keep doing it. I can't make decisions for you, but what I'm showing you is a different way. And you are right, that decision of, am I going to go to work or am I going to eat? You're absolutely right. For those who are living on the breadline is absolutely the fundamental question. Or when is my employer going to pay me?
Yeah.
And then we have to step in and help them out with food shops and stuff to make sure that they're going to get through. Some of them will already have money stashed away, albeit it's probably from old illegal money. I don't ask. It's not, if the police are after them, that's their position they want to run with, that's fine. But with us, we try and help them as much as we can. But it is a mindset shift when you've only ever been caught up in that madness.
So there are a few kind of things I'd like to dig into into Key for Life. But one is, I guess, the prison system, the system of justice, and perhaps the challenge of that maybe societally we think, well, if someone's done something wrong, then they need to pay the price. And then, some of the people you're working with have done things that are, in murder or whatever it might be, have caused pain to other people. And so there's in some ways, an understandable mindset of like, well, the idea here is punishment or something like that. And I wonder if you could just speak to, your kind of counter to that, or because one of the things I've really struck with, one of the things you said the other day was, we need to bring more compassion back into the system. And then maybe that's something that we could say societally, we need to be bringing more compassion into the system. But just speak to that a bit of like where you see that's necessary and maybe what happens if that's not there and what happens when it is there or something like that.
I mean, I think the problem we've got with the prison system is people are so stretched in the prison system. The whole system is just out of control. But when you look at the statistic that actually I was reminded by a guy who's in prison and he used to work at PwC, he's a very, very bright guy, that 90% they want to create a program, which I think is a brilliant idea as to how we're going to get it off the ground. They've asked me for a meeting with actually a big bank as well, a big investment bank, is that they reckon 90% of people in prison are neurodiverse. So they're suffering. So the biggest challenge you've got is that if they don't get the right medication or people are making decisions, in a very ungrounded way, which is what a lot of these boys are doing. There is fundamentally issues that sit within the prison that they reckon could be rectified if we could deal with it in the right way with something like ADHD, because these men are really struggling to run their lives in a coherent, comprehensive way. So there's that. If you go back to, what goes on in prison, the hardest thing, I think, when you look at the governor, how he or she is stretched, 20% of the people, up to 20% of their staff are bringing in contraband, drugs, telephones, and all of that stuff, and bringing it into the prison, selling it. And, I was, the prison we've just been, there was a whole wall of people who've been kicked out, and they then not have to go to prison. So it's really difficult for the governor. If you're trying to run a prison and some of your staff are up to no good, that in itself brings, I think, chaos, and it makes it really, really difficult. I think the next thing then is about identifying. So some of the men will say who've done Key for Life, that was the best thing I've ever done. I learned more in Key for Life. I've been in prison for so many years, but this is the only thing that's taught me the way. There is something about empowering people with the tools to be able to get on, whether you're in prison or you're not. So we do all sorts of things. As you know, we do the who are they hanging out with? How are they 24-hour clock, writing out what they're doing every day in prison? Have they got could they start reading a book? How are they going to improve themselves? There's that. What courses could they be doing? There's all of that needs to be expanded, right? And then the
because one would have thought that that's just baked into the system.
That's not.
But it's just absent, and absent of that, there's nothing.
Unless you're doing education, these things. Most of the guys on our course at the moment say that none of them are doing anything. They're just sitting in their cells all day.
Yeah, which just seems like
so because they've opted. So the big thing then is your rehabilitation, right? Yeah. So essentially, we are rehabilitating them, and we're doing as good a job as we can, and we get great feedback from the lads. Where I believe what's missing is getting more corporates, companies who are desperate for people to go and work for them, to take on the units and start training people with the view. So in my view, and I was talking to Serco about it, to all their heads of the different companies, if you want to hire people, it's something I used to, even with the Prince of Wales, when he was Prince, we used to discuss this, is customised training. So what you do if you're a company like Serco and you need to hire 20 people to go and work on satellites or whatever, train them while they're in prison, even if it's a week or two, give them an interview guarantee before they come out, and put them straight onto 6-week probation and straight into a job. So we need to be far more, and the other man I met a few weeks ago, who's a lovely man, is Lord Walker, Richard Walker, who runs Ice and Frozen Foods. He's employed 270 offenders. He's employed more than anyone else in the UK. But he's struggling to get companies to come and help him and follow his great example.
And what's the effect of that? So when you see people going through the system and then they're coming into a job, say, with one of these businesses, what's the effect of that?
Oh, it's huge. If you can keep them in the job, the effect is huge, because they then don't get diverted off to start drug dealing again or whatever they've been up to. But what you've got to understand is that there's a lot of work that has to go on. So the reason,
it's not just a case of here's some gainful employment.
Absolutely.
It's all the personal tools that enable someone to stay in gainful employment.
That's right. And the personal tools are all the stuff. That's why we want to create an app now. So they've got more to go to, a go-to reference point with Key for Life. They've got all our stuff and they learn it and they know it. But we need more to help them. But we have to literally, I would never trust any young man going out in a work taster unless we escort them there to make sure, until they're up and running, you've got to really hold their hand. I mean, most of them have never been on a tube before. They're gang affiliated, these guys. They're not going to get in a tube because they could get taken out. You have to think of the risk that goes with it. And then probation, rightly so, will be saying they can do this or they can't do this. They've got a whole license agreement when they come out, because most of them, unless it's murder, they're leaving prison halfway through their sentence plan. So if they're not compliant, probation will recall them, like what's just happened to that guy that we've just been put a lot of work and effort in. But we get great results. However, we could still do so much more. And what I will say is, by taking all these companies, so in the last 2 weeks in Thameside, we've probably, including the Serco guys, I've probably brought 60 business people in from different companies, top companies. And what I always say is, this is not a zoo. You are not coming in here just to have a look. We then do a follow-up call. We want action. So the action is work tasters for 3 days, be a mentor, do employability, or offer them work. And the other big challenge we've got with corporate Britain is this whole social value thing. So most companies are wanting to tick all these boxes. So if they've come into the prison with us, it's equivalent per person of something like £5,000 volunteering. We don't get the 5K. That's them, justifying it to the government and their contractors and their investors. I am saying, no. And there's a few of them who've just used us and put our name up and stuff. And I just won't have that. And I just think there's a lot of shocking stuff going on behind the scenes that we all need to bring out. There
are some very practical things that just make a lot of sense. And it doesn't make sense to have a system where people just cycle back into the system. It's obviously very expensive.
It is so.
And it's just kind of tragic all the way around. A tragic waste. And then there are these practical things that make sense, where you kind of go, well, if we do these things, then we can actually see better outcomes. It does take a massive amount of investment, because in some ways, in many cases, you're trying to, you're working with someone who's, had so much history that you're trying to help them, create a whole new track on which to move forward, and in every sense. And that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not.
It's not easy for any human being to change their kind of internal operating system, if you like. So all of that makes really good sense. It's very rational. On the emotive side, again, you may be working with people who have done very serious offences. And I wonder how you think about that, in terms of, is that something where you just go, well, it's just not my job to engage with that. I'm certainly not here to pass judgment. Or, and how would you, and maybe this isn't a useful question even, but I guess, maybe there are just some people who get the kind of work that Key for Life does. They get that's important and necessary. And then maybe there are some people who just don't, and go, well, when someone's done something bad, throw away the key kind of thing.
Yeah, no.
But how speak to how you think about that? Like, how do you, you're investing a lot of effort, time, resources, your life into serving people who, for whatever reason, have found themselves in prison. So how do you think about that piece?
I mean, I think you it's a really, really good question. So when I first started up Key for Life in 2012, one of my most shocking things was going to the Old Bailey and watching 14 guys being done, or 11, maybe it was 11 in the end, for joint enterprise murder, of which one of them was mine, who'd been on our program, our first program.
Yeah, so to be clear, joint enterprise murder was a law that was brought in that essentially was brought in to enable the system to bring to justice those people who had committed murder, because they hadn't been able to do that because it was never clear who actually did the murder.
Yeah.
There would be a gang event and it wasn't clear who did it. So no one was ever brought to account.
Yeah.
So the law was changed called this joint enterprise, so that everyone who is in proximity is then liable, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know what, every situation is different. But when I saw those men go down, and one of the guys, Tommy, he's obviously in Fossway with us. He's one of our key mentors now, and the other one's been in touch, and they're still in prison. But I know that I
think I met them.
You did.
Yeah.
You've met one of them, yeah. When I heard those mothers screaming when it was called out, I will never forget it. I even get goosebumps talking about it now. Now, in his instance, some of them weren't even there for the murder. Now, I find that really difficult to stomach, right? Yeah. And I find somebody who's going to get a full life sentence for that, it needs to be, and I know that Tommy's mother, she's doing a lot of work campaigning to the government.
So we're talking now, 20, has it been 20 years? Something?
No, he's 14 years. He's
14 years.
15.
Yeah.
So he'll be doing he'll have parole, and he'll hopefully in the next few years Cat D. So he's over the worst.
It's just very hard to understand and imagine that scenario where someone is, just spending. I remember years and years ago, a judge saying to me, I was actually sculpting him. I was sculpting his portrait. But one of the things that really stuck with me is he said, I think people don't appreciate what it means to have your liberty taken away. He says, I think people misunderstand. I think he was talking about people who are risking going to prison, as well as people who were maybe just onlookers. Yeah. Saying they don't understand. It's not. So right. It's not an easy ride.
It's a very difficult ride. They think it's all televisions and everyone can put their feet up and relax. It's not like that at all. And so your point though, just to say about the joint enterprise, then I have another guy, who's always claimed he wasn't in the car. He's been done for a double murder of his half sister, and another one, a very high profile case in Birmingham. He's served 22 years and he's got another 12 to go, and he's appealing it and has appealed it many times. And then you have another one that I know very well, because we've been mentoring him, we know him for years. And he was working and he sold a tracker to somebody and he got 28 years. He wasn't there for it. So again, they're trying to appeal that. Now, I don't think it's fair if I just sold a tracker. If somebody else had poor intentions, but maybe I knew about it, of course, there has to be a penalty. I totally understand that people need to be penalised for what they've done. But for the ones that I see who were on these joint enterprise charges, I think their sentences are
decades in prison.
It's draconian, and the book is thrown at them. And I also feel that I don't know whether some judges are more or stricter or more severe than others, but you definitely hear some people coming back with different,
So in some ways you're talking about people who have, where you might say there's been an injustice, where someone's dealing with a very harsh sentence, maybe decades in prison, where you would say that just seems completely out of proportion for their part.
But I still believe in
Yes.
punishment. What I'm not saying in life is, and some people feel, I do believe that people need to know
Yes.
what's right and wrong.
Surely.
But I think that what's missing in this whole system, really, it's the rehabilitation, right?
Yes.
Whilst you're in prison, if you can get access to more drugs, I mean, one of my men said he got access to more drugs and he's a bigger drug. He's using drugs more than he ever did when he was inside. We've got it's very difficult for these governors, as I said earlier. If you've got staff bringing in stuff, we've got to clean the whole thing needs to be cleaned up. But our mentality and our heart, like you talked about at the hearts and minds, we as a country now, we need to look at how others are doing it, and we need to look at doing things differently. If you always skin the cat in the same way, you're going to get the same results. And I believe that when you look at, so to give you an example, I've been very conscious of the fact that violence is very high in a lot of prisons. So I designed a new program with my team called the Violence Reduction Program. We have piloted it now in 3. We've done 2 at Vosware, 1 in Forest Bank, a month ago in Manchester, with the most violent guys. And the change in them and the change in what's going on has even come back via probation saying, we can't believe that the men that would normally be talking about their big drug deal when they come out, what they're going to do, are now saying, what kind of job are you going to get?
See, one of the things that was very striking to me, and I've seen this in other work as well, that there's something in beyond whatever the particular content of the program might be, the structure of the program, where you say we're going to develop this skill and this skill, etc. There's just something very transformational in meeting someone with, and this may sound a little fluffy, but my experience of it is that it's not fluffy. But when you meet someone, with an open heart, as a fellow human being who's having an experience where you can have some compassion, that they may find life challenging, they may be being met with very challenging things, and it's not to give people an easy ride, it's not to let people off of accountability or anything like that. But and I've seen you in action, Eva, and one of the things that I think is so transformational is that you're bringing into this space. You're not, you can be firm, you can be directive, but actually you're not being, you're not really telling people what to do. You're really meeting them with a sense of, I value, you've got a contribution. I value who you are. I'm meeting you as an equal in many ways, and I'm meeting you as someone who's also, been met with challenges, and I understand life can be difficult. I understand that you're being met with difficult choices. I'm maybe not articulating it very well, but there's something transformational in just that. And then maybe it comes back to the work that the King does, where a lot of his work seems to be, it's motivated by that heart-led desire, that heart-led intent to bring the heart into the work, so that it's not purely transactional, but that actually that does create results. That maybe creates the more lasting results in some ways, or it creates the possibility of results.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you come from the heart, that's such a lovely way of thank you for what you said. I think, I am tough, and even my team will say Eva can be tough, but I'm not running a kindergarten here. No. I'm running a charity that's dealing with some, as you said earlier, we've got some tough guys. But what I feel is if you try and step into your heart more, you're not going to judge them and start overthinking that man did this, or has he ticked that box, or because the minute you try and control them, everyone has free will. You can't control people. Yes. So free will for me is the big thing, even though at times there are some I would like to, particularly the guy I've just found out has gone back in, if only, but he had his learning to learn.
Well, I think that again, you've articulated it so well, which is, and perhaps that's what I was trying to point to, is that you come into the work understanding that, hey, you guys are going to do what you're going to do. I don't get to control that. I don't get to determine that. So really, you're giving the authority back to them.
That's right.
Where they're in a system that's saying, well, we're taking all the authority away from you. And then that itself is very empowering. I mean, it's literally empowering. And then again, then there's an opportunity for results to occur, for changes to happen, because you're not saying this is about me somehow, or someone else is going to do this for you.
Yeah.
So no, you get to do it. You get to make the choice, and it might be a very difficult choice.
Yeah, and you are so right. It's about that personal, because I'm always telling them, only you guys can decide if you're going to get temptation the minute you come out and someone says, do this with me, go and do a burglary, remove these drugs, it's over to you. And if you get caught and you're back in here, I don't have any huge, it's like the kid that went in yesterday. I said to the team, I'm not rushing to go to Exeter or get you locked down to Exeter. He's going to have to sit and sweat it out a bit now. He's got to take responsibility. That's the other thing. They have to take responsibility, because a lot of people are very quick at blaming everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm always saying, that sadly in life, we have to take responsibility for ourselves.
It's kind of funny, Eva, because as you said that, I was thinking, well, we can all raise our hand to that, and you can see that in the boardroom as much as you could see it in a jail. How quick we all are to look for, it's someone else's fault. I see that in businesses, and it's very human. And again, one of the great opportunities to kind of increase performance is to change that paradigm, where we're no longer defending our own, maybe it's ego, or our role, our job, our territory, whatever it might be, and making it about someone else. Like it's their fault, they're the problem. This is why it's not working, because everyone else should be doing something different. But we can start owning our part, and then start working collectively. Maybe I'm stretching a bit, but I think there's something in that you're working with very human experiences, very human conditions.
But don't forget, we've just had research done on us from the Metropolitan London University, huge, 180 pages, where they've gone in and analysed everything, and the prisoners, and they've been to Fossaway, and it's come back amazing. Can we get the government to take it seriously? We've messaged all of them, no. So what I decide in life is just quietly get on with what you're doing. And then maybe one day, we have got people interested, of course we have, but, and we've got circuit, we've got a lot of prisons and stuff. But there's a lot of lessons, in my view, in what we've done. And in a way, the lessons come from, 42 years I've spent in different charities. And I can tell you that if you don't unlock the pain at the beginning, and you just run an employment program, unless you've got somebody doing that, you're creating a revolving door.
I love that. Yeah. So so on the one hand, you've got the tangible program, if you like.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you've got the absolutely critical personal work, which you just defined as unlocking the pain. That's such a wonderful way to put it. But to enable people to process that, because if you can't do that, the others never is unlikely to count for anything.
Spot on. And that's the thing. Our results, we do 6 formal days in prison. So we do the unlocking with the horses. We bring them in there, the absolute game changers. We do music, we do football with QPR. Then we have a bunch of tools that we've developed, and they love it. Then we do mentoring. So we're training up loads of business people and people from, it doesn't matter what background, to come in and give time to these guys. I had a chief exec of probably the biggest insurance company, who's going through a takeover potentially at the moment. He still comes in with his whole team. They can't get enough of it. They're writing letters to my guys via email going, I want to help this guy. A couple of bad decisions has brought this bloke in. And this guy he's mentoring runs a big property company.
Well, I gotta say that when, the experiences I've had with Key for Life, coming in and then coming into the prisons with your program, and, I experienced it myself, but also seeing it in all the other people who were coming in to it, everyone was touched by, there is this transformational element of it, which, I could see everyone was having a transformational experience themselves. So you're serving both, your clients in prison, but you're also serving the people who are engaging with your clients, and they're having a transformational experience too. And it's again, I haven't really got the words for it, but I could absolutely see how there's something very profound in what you're doing that is transformational. It's the best word I have for it.
Well, you're so kind to say that, because, and it's so lovely to hear from somebody who, a third party, because when you're in it, sometimes you're up to here. But, you know, when you watch, as you say, the business people come in and do the mentoring, then we have employability. So we've got to tell these guys, turn up for an interview, shake hands, proper shaking hands. We could spend 20 minutes on shaking hands and eye contact.
Yeah.
And then we've got to get like KPMG came in, we did the CV prep, we do the mock interviews, and then we do the do's and don'ts in the workplace. So that always kicks off when I tell them, or they tell them, you know, you're sitting beside a pretty girl at work, you can't suddenly start chasing her on socials. That they can't believe they can't do that.
Yeah.
So even going out for a fag break, you just don't go out any old time every 5 minutes. You have to explain if you've never worked before.
Yeah.
And then the following week, which is our last week, which we had last week and this week, was Dragon's Den, you know, getting them to pitch business plans. And their business plans are unbelievable what they come up with. And then the final day, which was this week, was meet the company. And to see them in their little shirts, they all looked fabulous with their CVs. And we had over 20 companies interviewing them. Now that for me is the game changer, watching the change. And then this week we also had Serco's board come in, and to watch them pitch to them. I don't think anyone could believe what they were like. And then when they come out of prison, you know, we're at the gates to collect them. The key is getting them on work tasters. And then we try and get them, so 3 days doing activities. They love boxing, they love football. They come down here to Somerset, a lot of them come and see the horses, walk up the Tor. The Tor is always Glastonbury Tor is their big thing they love. And then the really important bit then, of course, is once they finish, we train so many of them up to, and we're starting again the week after next, to be key mentors. You've presented and trained some of those guys, and they are the backbone of Key for Life. They're the ones that either in prison and they get their AQA qualification. So it is, but I think the underlying bits of Key for Life, there are definitely, the model works great. The corporate world now really needs to step up. You know, we've got the United Flag. We give a company, if they employ somebody for a minimum of 6 months, we now that needs to be everywhere. Yes. Not enough companies are interviewing. Half companies in Britain will not employ offenders. And at the moment, there are 12 million people in Britain with a criminal conviction. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more that needs to be done. But I feel that, and it's so lovely the way you describe Key for Life, because we're so in it, the compassion and the heart and all that. That's the key.
Yeah.
You know, we've got.
Well, I really think it is the key, and because that is what enables then the tangible work, if you like. And so, well, there's lots more I could ask about all of that, but I want to just change gear a little bit and just think about, in your journey, Eva, and like I say, I think when you look back on it, there are some really clear through lines where the work that you're now doing with Key for Life just makes so much sense, and in a way you can see those threads all the way through. But in your experience, as you know, you've very much been the leader, the champion, and I think this is quite, in some ways, it may be quite typical of any founder of a business, but particularly with charities, maybe, I'm not sure, but where you very much are the work, and then part of the challenge is working. How do you scale that from more than you, and then you do that. You get other people trained to then do the work. But you have been the champion, you have been the leader. And maybe what have been for you some of the lessons you've learned about being that champion and how you keep going, because you've been met with a lot of challenges, both personally and then I imagine in the business of the charity, and then the continual challenge to fundraise, etc. So what enables you to keep going as that champion?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I mean, I think what I've learned over the years is my mental, physical, emotional state, to keep that in balance as best as I can, and reminding myself why I do this is probably the most important thing of all. And I happen to, I do a lot of, I happen to be lucky enough I do a lot of energy work and healing work on people. I've found I had healing hands when I was in my early 20s. So not that I do a lot of that anymore, but I have a great faith. And I think I have a very strict routine on myself every single day. I will work do a bit of spiritual work before I do anything. I run, I do exercise, I try and eat well. And I try now and not allow myself, because Key for Life is all encompassing. There's so much to be done, that I try and just have faith in following the path that I feel is of the least resistance.
Yes.
That's not always been the case. And you're right when you said I've had challenges, both outside the charity, inside the charity. You know, there has been issues. You know, a lot of people, I think a number of people who work for me, it either works with me or it doesn't. I'm very driven. Some people will find she's too difficult to keep up with, very demanding, but I'm on a mission, and it's not everyone's mission. And, you know, you've got to come in with the right mindset.
I really like that point, Eva, of, you know, so you've got a very clear sense of mission, you're on a mission, and then you've got your own, you know, style, your own personality, the way you work. And in some ways there's a great freedom in having the conviction of that, where you say, look, there is just a way that I roll, and that's not going to work for everyone.
No, it doesn't.
And in some ways that's true in any setting. I think any business, that, you know, the goal isn't necessarily to be the generic leader, like what a leader looks like. It's, in some ways, the goal is to be more of the leader that you are. And then that is going to work for some people, and it's not going to work for everybody. But then part of the job is to bring the people around you for whom that does work.
Absolutely.
And then when you can all be moving together on the mission.
I mean, you know what? The problem with this, with Key for Life, it's like a mirror. If you've got your own crap, it'll throw it out at you. Whenever I get it thrown at me, we all do. Because we're about transformation. We as a team have to be as strong as we can possibly be. And it's very difficult at times. It's very hard work. It's very demanding. And like you said, and that is the issue. So with me, I say to people, you'll either hate it, you'll love it. I'm black and white. I don't do grey. And I'm on top of people. And a lot of people turn around and say, no, it wasn't what I thought I was coming in to do. Well, I'm afraid that's what the job is. And it's above and beyond. There's nothing glamorous about this job. Nothing. But it's hugely rewarding. And the problem when you work in this sector with these men, you will get let down time and time again. So you've got to get used to, you know, stepping up again and going back for more, because that's the nature of our work. But you never need to, you know, a lot of us can, it's also, the other side is money. You know, we are gifted money, a lot of money, you know, under $1 million from a lot of trust funds, foundations, individuals, people, events who go, and people go, run for us. I'm hot on how the money is used and how people use their time. So if I think the time's not being used wisely, or someone's not bringing in the outputs, I am on them. I'm not here just to, because at the end of the day, that's a very poor reflection.
Well, I'm often have been struck. I've had a little bit of involvement with charities in the past, and including being part of founding one many years ago. And particularly that experience actually really drove home to me just how tough it can be as an organization doing really good work. And all you want to do is do the good work, because you know it's good. And everyone who comes into contact goes, this is great, this is brilliant, you know, do more. But there's at least half of the work is getting the funding to do the work.
That's right.
And so there's a whole nother business within the business. And so I really take my hat off to anyone who's prepared to, you know, do the work, that, like, because it is so much work to keep that going, to keep that hamster wheel moving.
And reporting to your fund.
And the resilience it takes to do that is just, I think, extraordinary. And of course, the other part of it, and I think people who, you know, anyone in business will get this, is that things don't happen for nothing. I mean, you know, people's lives cost money, work costs money, people need to be paid to do things. Right. And, you know, and obviously, you know, charities also engage a lot of volunteer work, and that's important, but it's not that everything can be done on a volunteer basis. I mean, that's just not how the world turns. And so there's just a lot of basic, I just think it takes tremendous tremendous determination, and that's an understatement,
You're so kind
to keep going.
You are. Do you know what? It's the money. I was talking to my chairman the other night about just that. We spend so much time, and we've got, great small fundraising team, but Sarah and others do a great job. It is tough because when you can see, I'm one looking at the end of the year and how we're going to fund this, and if we want to invest in this, we need this, it's endless. But the good news, and the other thing that's quite interesting is that obviously you are then, you've got the auditors. So they've just finished auditing us, and they want to look at absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure everything is done beautifully, all your reporting's done beautifully, everything is accounted for beautifully.
Yeah. And that's also not cost-free, of course.
No, of course it's not. And they come. So there's a lot, I think, people don't necessarily see that goes behind all of us who run charities. We're governed, by trustees, we're governed by the Charities Commission. And if I say I'm going to do something on a contract, like the lottery, I've got to do it.
Yeah.
And, that's the other thing. And don't forget, with prisons, it's precarious because you don't know when you're going to get into your next prison. It's not like you've got a plan for 3 years. It doesn't work like that.
The other thing I just want to touch, and then I've got a couple of questions to really close. But you mentioned something about needing that determination, that resilience, because you will get people who kind of fall out of the system, and that can be tough for your team where they've invested so much in someone, and then they seem to be doing so well, and then maybe they fall back in, etc. But there was something in what you were saying that I really resonated with me. With the work that I do with people, with top executives, where it's helping people to, in some ways, engage with the work beyond the outcome. So if you can understand that there's an opportunity to engage with what we're doing here, where you're no longer thinking about the outcome, which sounds counterintuitive because of course we're interested in the outcome. And that would be true whether you're doing Key for Life's work or whether you're, running a function in a multinational. Of course you're interested in the outcome. It's critical because without those results, in a way you cease to exist. But in some ways, the most powerful place from which to engage with the work is when you can set that aside. And that's when you actually start to become...
You're so right.
Even more effective and more resilient, actually. But I think also more effective, more strategic, etc. It's kind of interesting.
See, I love that. And that, when I'm not, exactly how you've described it, when I'm not worrying about all those and let things just be, and that's, in a way, my sort of spiritual hat comes on, going, come on, Eva, trust.
Yes.
And trust and having faith is a great thing. But too many times we listen to this little brain going, boom, boom, boom at us, worry, worry, worry. What's going to happen? And if we paint scenarios in our head, if I don't get this, am I going to get into trouble by my funder? Or, so there's a lot of that. And I think with me, it's trying to just trust in the process. It was like this month, for example, coming into now March, we have had a program postponed in a prison, which actually now has enabled us to do all the things that we haven't been able to do, which is good. But I'm now wanting to be very, on it for these two new. We've just won 2 amazing contracts, electronic monitoring, where we're taking on men from Bristol and London who are on tag, and a lot of them have been non-compliant, so they don't stay in at night when they should be, or there's been issues or challenges with them. And some of them get recalled. So we're going to work with a bunch of them in the community, which will be lovely. And that's going to be a new program. But already I'm the one thinking, I've got to get probation to do this. I've got to get this happening. I've got to,
And so important to keep coming back to the central intent, the central purpose, where just like remind yourself, and we get to remind ourselves, what this is really about. Why am I here in the first place? And that can become a very secure foundation. Okay, well, when I'm aligned with that, I'm okay.
That's right.
We're okay.
That's right. And that's exactly the point you were making, that I'm okay. But my worst, it's just when you're running big contracts, you don't want to let people down, and you don't want to be penalized. And the team, we're all in it. But so it's, you've hit the nail on that last point. Is very, very important for me to remind myself.
Okay, Eva, I've got a couple of questions just to close with. So how do you see yourself, how do you see Key for Life increasing impact, say, in the next year also?
in the next
What's
year.
the kind of
I think
key aspiration?
the aspiration really with Key for Life now is on the prisons we're in at the moment is doing more depth charge work, which means violence reduction, helping men when they come out, do a pre-release, and also working with the staff. Like we've just started working, as I mentioned, at HMP Bristol. So the big thing now is trying to get Key for Life to go in, see a problem a governor's got, depth charge in, and see if we can help the prison. So we are expanding to other places, but we also want to get the model right. And I think that's going to be for us a real game changer if we can prove to the prison service that we've got techniques to bring. Because, you know, when there's fights on the wings, staff get beaten up as well, and then they're off on sick leave for months. So you've got to see there's not only a knock-on effect. So, you know, the day I went to the prison recently, last week, the man said, Eva, I'm very glad you're here, and I'm glad I'm looking at violence reduction because I've only been in 2 hours this morning and I've had 34 adjudications this morning.
Wow.
So that gives you an indication.
Yeah. Okay, so then final question, if you could change
And one other thing I want to say is, you said about just prisons, but my big thing now is that we're going to be expanding the United Flag. We want more companies in Britain to step up and do more and employ offenders.
Yeah.
That's going to be really important, change their business behaviour.
Well, maybe that speaks to the final question, which is if you could change one thing, what would that be?
I think that would be it. It would be changing the way that the corporate world sees people who've been to prison.
Yeah. Wonderful. Eva, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for all you've done for Key for Life. You've been amazing. Not only are you interviewing me, you've also really put your neck out with us and helped these men. So thank you for what you do for us.
Thanks, Eva. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you're doing. Are we going to look at some horses now?
Yes, we are.
We're going to meet some horses.
Yes, go meet Carlos and Cruising. They'll be very excited to see you.
Fantastic.
Lovely.